Welcome back to Cult Pop. I'm your host, Jim Hall. Today we have another great show for you. Ann and Jeff VanDermeer have come back on. It's been about a 2-year wait since we had them on before. They've been on twice previously, and I just absolutely love their stuff, and I'm just delighted to have them back. Today they're going to talk about a bunch of different things they've got going on. In about a month or so, they have a great collection called The Weird, which spans over 100 years of weird writing. They're editing that, and that's going to be coming out, I believe, in October, so we'll see that. The Thackeray T. Lampshade Cabinet of Curiosities. This is just an amazing book that is out right now. As you watch this, you'll be able to purchase this book, and this is just something fantastic. And they've got a lot of other stuff going on that we'll talk about, but they've been two of my favorite guests in the past. Ann and Jeff, I'm so glad to have you back on Cult Pop. Thanks for being on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
As I say, I always get great responses when you guys are on the show. Your stuff is absolutely amazing. You're a great team when you work together, and you're great individually. But right now we're going to talk about the stuff you're working on as a team. The first thing is something that's really amazing. Just got it in my hands, hot off the presses, so I'm real impressed it got out to me. The Thackeray T. Lampshade Cabinet of Curiosities. And this kind of follows up something, Jeff, you did about 8 years ago, I remember, that was also very popular. You've brought together some of the coolest authors and artists around in fantasy and sci-fi. So why don't you folks tell us about this book?
Well, yeah, the first book was the Thackeray T. Lampshade Pocket Guide to Eccentric and Discredited Diseases, and was literally a fake disease guide that still is. We still get emails from people associated with medical libraries and whatnot who are just absolutely tickled that they find it in the medical guide section of their libraries, as if it's a real guide. And we had a lot of fun doing that. In part because we did readings where the writers would actually come dressed in medical garb with beakers and stuff, and if you weren't there for the reading, you wouldn't necessarily know whether you were listening to a mini medical conference where you're talking about motile sarcoma or something, or if it was a fiction reading. So we had a lot of fun with that. But we didn't want to do a fake disease guide too. We wanted to do something that this time was a little less of a novelty book. And even though we really loved what we did with the fake disease guide, we thought we wanted to kind of branch out and do something that was a little more maybe diverse, more complicated.
We liked the whole idea of a secret life of objects. You know how the things you collect throughout your lifetime, they have a meaning. And so we were looking at Dr. Lampshade, who after all did live to be 103 years old. And perhaps he had been collecting these things along the way because he's traveled extensively all over the world. And we came up with this idea of a cabinet of curiosities, which would allow us to do the thing we love most, is mixing the art and the fiction together, different artists and different writers coming together to make this book come alive.
So this time, for example, we have Mike Mignola, who did Hellboy, contributing 4 original pieces of art just for this anthology. He was actually thrilled because he really wanted to work with people like Michael Moorcock, and he never had a chance to. So we were able to go to Michael Moorcock and say, would you mind writing a story to a Mike Mignola piece of art, which was a big thrill for us too. So we had a lot of great experiences like that.
Well, the names in this book are just absolutely unbelievable. Alan Moore, who I'm a huge fan of, Sherry Priest, Carrie Vaughn, big fan of. But something I've praised you guys on in the past is bringing in new authors, new artists to bring to people's attention. And I always seem to love when you guys comment on Facebook and now in these books, when you find these diamonds in the rough, these incredible authors that people may not know about. And I think that's really great that it's great to get the names in there. It helps sell the books, but I think it's also fantastic that you dabble in with people that may be first-time contributors or newer people that everybody may not be familiar with. And there's some new names in this one and in past anthologies you've done, and I think that's really cool that you folks do that.
Well, thank you. We really enjoy uncovering these, like you said, diamonds in the rough and these up-and-coming writers, because we are always looking to see what's out there, what's wonderful, and what's fantastic. And a lot of times it does come from someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience yet. And we love to see how they can grow and change in their writing as well.
Well, I think the thing is that we have in this anthology, which is kind of like I would say like a fantasy treasury of some of the best fantasy writers working today. We also have some of the up-and-coming generation, like Amal El-Motar is an amazing writer who I think is going to do great things. There's a great Iranian writer named Reza Negarestani who is in the book. So yeah, the great thing about this is that Harper Voyager was totally cool with having a wide variety of writers in the book. Anytime a big publisher does an original anthology, they're kind of rolling the dice. You never know exactly what's going to happen, no matter how cool the concept, no matter what names you have. So we're really, really happy with what they've done for the book and the fact that we were able to include such a wide variety of writers.
And we did something really interesting that brought in a lot of other people as well. We did this thing on Jeff's blog where we allowed people to submit in really short little stories, little tiny exhibits, so to speak, about
Flash
different
fictions.
objects, flash fictions, 150 words, and they were able to submit them onto the blog. And after we did that, we were able to I think we picked out 32 out of over 300 that have been submitted. And some of those were submitted by writers who have been around for a while, but some of them, this is the first time they've ever been published. So we were able to include those people as well.
Yes, that's exactly the type of stuff I'm talking about, and it's just so amazing flipping through this book. The art is so neat, and I think a lot of people are going to have a great time just thumbing through, seeing a particular image that really strikes their fancy, reading that story, then flipping back 3 stories. And this is going to be a book I'm sure people return to time and time again, reading stories, rereading stories, looking at this amazing art. The art is absolutely amazing in this thing, and I think you guys have just done a spectacular job here with this. But can I don't know if it's fair or not, but can I ask both of you for a favorite story from the book and why you really enjoy it, or a story that really intrigued you, or the art piece that accompanies it, some interesting tidbit?
I'll start, I guess. Well, first of all, one art piece we really like in there is by Jan Svenkmeyer, who's a Czech artist, and we like it because it took forever to track down his gallery in Prague, and we bought this amazing print there of like this kind of cryptozoology print. And we were always like, there's got to be some way that we can put this into a book someday. And in some ways, I sometimes wonder if we came up with the idea of this book just so we could put that print in the book. But in terms of stories, one that I'm really fond of, because he's kind of a hero of mine, and also because it's just a great idea and it shows that he's still going strong, is Michael Moorcock's story, because he took Mignola's piece and he created this amazingly hilarious story, and also a very pointed story, about these missionaries around 1900 who decide that they're going to, who create a machine that allows them to miniaturize themselves, and their idea is that they're going to have themselves injected into the bloodstreams of heathens and try to convert them on the cellular level. And it goes terribly, terribly wrong, and they wind up not being able to get quite back to their normal size. And for years after, and I'm not really ruining the story because it's all in the telling, they find bits and pieces, body parts in cans of dog food in the area, and people speculate for the longest time that it's actually the remains of fairies, but no, it's not. It's actually these failed missionaries. And it's just an example of an amazing imagination at work and a writer who is still at the top of his game after so many decades.
Oh, fantastic. Great story. Thanks. How about you, Ann?
Well, it's hard for me to pick my favorite story because I love them so much, but if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me, I would like to talk about a couple of the little exhibits at the back of the book.
Please do.
There's one little exhibit by a writer by the name of Graham Lothar, and this is called Ear Eye. And just the title alone of that, Ear Eye, is just amazing to me, and I love the whole story. And it's this contraption that you use to be able to look into your own ear. And it's just the way he describes it is so beautiful. And then one of my other favorite ones of those small exhibits in the back is something called The Bear Gun. And The Bear Gun was written by Adam Mills. And the bear gun, as you might think, is a gun that shoots out a bear. And, just little things like that we had a lot of fun with. And it was just a fantastic project to put together.
And I think one thing that we've been delighted by is so far the reviewers have really gotten the concept, because one problem with a book like this is you can tell just from the layout it is meant for browsing, it is meant for dipping into. And just like you wouldn't read a whole Cabinet of Curiosities real book, page by page, the same thing applies to this. It's meant to be a book you come back to again and again. And I think that's how it's best appreciated. The same way it was with the Fake Disease Guide. So.
Yeah, and it's just it's such a striking cover. and you and I have talked about this in the past. I talk with a lot of authors about this. Jerry and I always talk about this. It's so important in this day and age with the bookstores dwindling and all that to have a book that catches your eye. And this cover catches your eye from across a room. It is absolutely amazing. It's the little skull on the side here I'm looking at. There's a frog, the beautiful piece on the top. It's really amazing. And then just thumbing through, I think it'll just lead to a lot of sales. People just looking at it, wow, this is cool, thumbing through. And the first, you flip through the first 30 pages and there's all this amazing art. So you guys have done an amazing job again. You're an amazing team. We're going to, as always, have a link up, and we will have your website up and different ways for the folks to order this book. But I want to give you guys time to talk about another anthology that's coming out, and this is even huge, broad in scope, The Weird. And from the information I have, over 100 years of weird tales. I don't even know how you begin to sift through that type of material, so I'm curious about that. But let's jump into that one now and talk about that anthology that's due out here, I believe, in October.
We did spend a lot of time reading weird fiction, and it led to a lot of strange dreams on many nights. I'll tell you that.
Well, I think it's 750,000 words, so basically it was like editing 5 or 6 anthologies at the same time under one cover, because it's about 1,300 pages in an oversized trade paperback format. In fact, it's so oversized, it's 2 columns inside, which I really wasn't fond of as an idea, but because the oversized trade paperback is large enough, it actually is like just literally having 2 pages per page instead of 1. And it reads really, really well. Mm-hmm. But that was the only way they could do it and have it be 1 volume. It's actually probably the largest volume of weird fiction ever published under 1 cover. And we probably read around, for the 750,000 words, we probably read about 6 to 8 million words
yes, maybe
of fiction.
10.
And the other thing was, at the time when Atlantic was going to first put it out, they were under the gun time-wise because there was a slot they wanted to fill, and so we had to do all of this in 6 months. And basically the book took over our lives, and that's all we did. I think we worked a lot of 20-hour days, basically, to make sure we got to where we wanted to be. But, it's got an amazing lineup. I mean, it truly is amazing because it combines mainstream and pulp and genre and the more surreal weird and even some weird sci-fi, just a little bit of that. And, of course, your classics like H.P. Lovecraft, but I think this is the first time that Franz Kafka, H.P. Lovecraft, Ben Okri, Shirley Jackson, Leonora Carrington, I got to go through the list here because I'm going to forget some of them, Jamaica Kincaid, George R. R. Martin, William Gibson, M. John Harrison, Joanna Russ, Octavia Butler, Karen Joy Fowler, Murakami have all been in the same volume, in the same book together. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that we really liked about this is that you have these divisions between mainstream and genre all the time, and sometimes it's reflected in the anthologies too. And here we were able to say, hey, look, back in the 30s and 40s, it wasn't just Lovecraft, it was all these other people all around the world who were writing weird type fiction.
And now, did you break this book into time periods, or how do you differentiate in stories? Is it through eras or what?
The stories are listed chronologically. We thought that made the most sense to do them that way. But I think one of the things that we're also very proud of with this particular book is that we actually commissioned some brand new translations of some stories, and some of them for the first time in English as well. So we're very excited about that. I think we had, about 5 or 6?
I think 7 or 8. And
new translations.
And as you might imagine, getting the permissions for some of these stories, like Leonora Carrington, it was hard to track down her agent. So at one point, our backup plan was to ask our friend in the Mexican circus, because Leonora Carrington, this early era surrealist who was 93 at the time, lives on a Mexican beach. We were going to have our friend in the Mexican circus take the contract down to her house to try to get her to sign it. And at the last second, through 6 degrees of separation through several different gallery owners, because she's also was a painter, we finally tracked her down. And there are all kinds of stories like that. Some of them we can't really tell about tracking down the permissions, but 116 stories getting world English rights, including ebook. You can imagine that was quite the experience.
Well, I'm blown away that you tell me it was 6 months. This is a lifetime of an accomplishment here, and I'm really impressed just by the foreword, Michael Moorcock, the afterword, China Meeville. Those are two great names there that I'm so looking forward to reading this and hearing what they have to reading what they have to say about this grand spanning book here.
And Jeff keeps forgetting that during that time period that we were putting together the Weird Anthology, we were also delivering Steampunk 2, Steampunk Reloaded, and the Kosher Guide to Imaginary Animals came out. So and he also had a short story collection he had to put together and a nonfiction book. Everything in the space of this 6-month period. So it was pretty crazy town around here for a while.
It was fairly
You guys
intense,
don't sleep a lot, do you, down there in Florida?
We didn't during that time period. Then when the proofs came, when we had to print out 1,200 pages and basically, do our normal quality control in addition to what the publisher does and read it word for word again, that was quite an experience too.
Wow. Well, absolutely amazing. And as always, I'm also going to have this up on the website, and we will make sure that we help promote this. This is something that I really think is going to be absolutely amazing. And this is where we're going to say goodbye to you for right now.
Okay.
We're going to take a little break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk with Jeff for a little bit more. So stay tuned for more Cult Pop. Welcome back to Cult Pop. Again, I'm Jim Hall, and with me is Jeff VanDermeer now, solo, minus Ann, and we're just going to talk about some solo stuff he's got going on now. And Jeff, welcome back. Wanted to talk now a little bit about the Steampunk Bible. This is really something amazing you've put out here. The steampunk movement is a real big thing. It's got a lot of legs now, 5, 7, 10 years in almost now. Talk a bit about the Steampunk Bible. You've had a lot to do with that movement. And talk about bringing a lot of these people who have been either big in the steampunk movement or people who are first-time kind of contributors to this kind of stuff. Talk about how you got these people involved and talk about the project, please.
Yeah, well, the idea was to find some of the most compelling stories and then kind of have that be the backbone of the book across a wide variety of different types of steampunk, from the maker movement to fashion, the literature, movies, and everything else. And so that's what was appealing to me about the project, in addition to the fact that it's the first coffee table book I've ever done. I mean, granted, there's a lot of text. There's about 50,000 words of text in there, but there's also about 250 full-color photographs. So there was a dual challenge, which was, to know what to focus on and to be comprehensive but not be an encyclopedia, because I thought that would be kind of boring. And also with the internet, it's really a loser's game to try to keep up and catalog everything in a book, because you're always going to be outstripped by the internet. So what we did is we created what I think is the most comprehensive overview of steampunk ever put together in this form, and we were very playful with it. We found a lot of cool stuff, like there's a guy in Wisconsin, Dr. Evermore, did this steampunk park that made him kind of the godfather of the steampunk maker movement. He basically was an engineer who I think worked for NASA or worked for a lot of different, big names. And then when he retired, he created this park out of parts that he scavenged basically, or he bought. And so there's a whole history of 20th century engineering that went into this whimsically, imagined park that's like half observatory and all these other different things, and basically a huge sculpture. And so that's what I find really interesting, is the repurposing of stuff. That's really what steampunk is about. It's retrofuturism. It's about using the past to kind of reimagine what we're doing now. And it's totally against things like the kind of Apple seamless functionality that you see, the seamless design, which is beautiful in its own right. But steampunk's very tactile, and I think that's what's interesting about it. It's kind of Baroque in places. It's very much about do-it-yourself, and even to some extent about sustainability. There's a magazine called Steampunk Magazine that's kind of on the anarchist end of all of this, and so you have a wide spectrum of different things going on, and that's what I found interesting. Even though I myself am not really a steampunk, I don't really write a whole lot of steampunk fiction, but being able to observe and interview all these people was pretty damn cool.
And the first two collections you did, the first Steampunk and then the Steampunk Reloaded, were so well received. The stories in there are really incredible. I was just really pleased to hear that you decided to do this third installment as a coffee table type thing, a big collected book. I think this will be well received also.
It's been reviewed pretty much everywhere. I mean, LA Times, everywhere else, New York Times. So it's done very, very well. And it's actually interesting because sometimes it takes a book to kind of have people's thoughts coalesce about something. And what I find really, really cool is that, for example, I think Austin Peay University in Tennessee, they used the book as a handbook for a class on steampunk. And
Oh, wow.
I get a lot of email from me and also S.J. Chambers, who I wrote the book with, get a lot of email about people who pick it up and like, oh, this is what steampunk is. And it's kind of like, now I kind of have an understanding of it, and they're getting into it. And then also being able to report about kind of the next generation of steampunk, which has a lot to do with issues of diversity and examining colonial periods and things like that, and a more serious side of it in addition to the stuff that's just fun.
Jeff, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the Ambergris novels. That's how we originally met. You know, I'm a big fan. Finch came out a few years ago. Is there anything new that will be coming out in the Ambergris world?
Well, Richard A. Kirk is an artist who contacted me because he'd read City of Saints and Mad Men and loved it. And he said he'd love to collaborate, so I said, what the heck, why don't you put together 10 or 11 illustrations that are inspired by City of Saints, and I'll write stories around them as a way of kind of kickstarting my imagination from that time period in Ambergris. And so Centipede Press gave us a contract to do that. And so there'll be a limited edition and a limited trade edition that comes out from Centipede. And then eventually those stories will wind up in probably my next major collection as well. So.
Oh, fantastic. I know your fans will be looking for that, and we'll certainly help spread the word. That's just absolutely love your stuff and love the Ambergris stuff. So I remember you posting about that artist, so he was spectacular. So I'll look forward to seeing that. Jeff, I wanted to give you a quick opportunity to talk about a summer program you work with students, and it's kind of a neat educational thing you do. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
It's called Shared Worlds, and it's out of Wofford College. And if you just Google Shared Worlds Wofford College, you'll get the URL. But basically, it's a science fiction fantasy writing camp. And every year, 40 students come out, apply, and get accepted and come out and spend 2 weeks at Wofford College with all these great professional writers coming in as guests. Nnedi Okorafor came this last year, Minister Faust, Ekaterina Sidia. We've had Holly Black. We're going to have Lev Grossman. We're going to have, I mean, just about anybody, Naomi Novik next year. And the first week they get into groups of 10 and they literally build their own worlds. And then the second week they write in them. And it's just a great experience for them on a lot of levels because they're not just writing, they're also having to work together. They're learning a lot, kind of in a funny way, because they have to learn a lot about biology and politics and everything else to build their world. So they're learning even though it's for a fun reason. And they get outings to the local bookstore, which just written up in Publishers Weekly as one of the most dynamic in the country. And so it's just a great experience for them. And we're funded by an Amazon grant, a very generous Amazon grant. We're fairly hopeful that that'll be renewed for next year. And eventually we're going to have satellites probably one on the West Coast, hopefully one overseas. And it's just wonderful to see kids who are so invested in reading. And these kids, when they go to a bookstore, they clean it out. I mean, you take these 40 kids to a bookstore and pretty much it's empty by the time they leave. So.
Well, I've read about the program on your blog and on Facebook, and I just think it's a really cool thing, and I wanted to give you a little opportunity to talk about it, and we'll have stuff up to get to your website, and people can read more about it there. So I guess this is a good time to share people your website. Why don't you tell folks at home the website again?
The best website to go to is just jeffvandermeer.com, and we're going to be building, the end of October, a new website called weirdfictionreview.com will go up, and that's going to basically just cover weird fiction, art, music. It's going to be a nexus for all kinds of arts information, articles, reprints of stories. Basically, it's going to be kind of a nexus for weird stuff.
Well, excellent. And Jeff, you know that we'll have those linked to our Cult Pop website, so anytime folks visit the show, they can just click right on and be able to get right directly to your website from our website. So I want to thank you, Jeff, for being on. You know, I love your stuff. I'm so thankful you came on today. Please thank Ann for me again, and I look forward to having you on the show again.
Well, thanks a lot for having us. We really appreciate it. So.
Okay, guys. Folks, that was Ann and Jeff VanDermeer. Absolutely love them. I want you to stay tuned for more Cult Pop. Welcome back to Cult Pop. Pretty good show here today. I'm such a big fan of Ann and Jeff VanDermeer. Great people. Their stuff is amazing, so I'm really glad they came on again. If you enjoyed this episode, take a look at the website, and they were on twice before, and there's some really cool stuff on those episodes, so take a look at that. And then speaking of past shows, John Snider, the artist, was on here a couple of episodes back, and he's an amazing artist doing a lot of great work for IDW. He was nice enough to forward some images of some stuff he talked a little bit about when he was on the show. Infestation, the book he discussed, is going to be collected in a trade collection from IDW. So he sent some beautiful images that you can see here of the trade, a couple of really nice images. And then also something really cool coming out from IDW, should be out as you watch this, is Duke Nukem. You remember the video game way back when? It was the baddest, coolest game out there. Well, IDW has done this great comic book that kind of corresponds with the re-release of the new Duke Nukem game, and John has done some covers for it, and as usual, his work is absolutely amazing. So you can look back at the full interview with John at our website, and to take a look at more of this great IDW work, just go to the IDW link that we have at Cult Pop. As always, just return to our website, and you can link up to any of the great authors, artists, or people you see on the show. And you can do that at www.cult-pop.com. And I want to thank Ann and Jeff again. I want to thank John for sending these wonderful images. And I want to thank you for watching. Thank you.